I think it's a valuable thing to try and say to people who are depressed. Like you do realize this is just one version of your life, and this is not. It doesn't have to be forever. Because I think it is really difficult. It's difficult for anyone, like in any mental state, to imagine the person you'll be in 5 years, because our brains can't really do that, and also life is too complicated. But I do think it's a good mental exercise. You don't have to be depressed, even if it's just having a bad day. It's worth saying to yourself, will this matter for a start, in 20 minutes? But if so, then will it matter in, say, 20 days, months, and so on? There's normally a future point where most of the stuff that's currently got you down doesn't have to anymore. It's just, again, it's a like mental exercise to get yourself from here to there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, even as an example, right, I had a really bad day on, what are we today? Today's Wednesday, on Monday, where I was just exhausted. There was no particular reason for it. I was mentally exhausted. Physically, my body was aching from doing nothing all weekend. So I was just like, and I could have let that funk continue throughout the week, but I just thought to myself, look, let me just be with this today. Let me be exhausted. Let me feel a bit crap today. Get a really good night's sleep. I went to bed early, got a really good night's sleep, and wake up, and let's see how the next day is.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might still be in the funk, and that's fine. But other times it's like you can wake up and feel fresh again. And I think, like you said, it's looking at it in terms of like a short moment in time. And it's like there's always, to use a book analogy, there's always another page that can be turned, which is a fresh page, and you can start again on that page with
That's
a
right.
better.
I think that's a particularly good mindset to be in now, because the uncertainty of life is really exhausting at the moment. No one knows what's going to happen. But for Christmas, beyond that, there's all the winter stretching in front of you. If you start thinking about it as another 3 or 4 or 6 or whatever 9 months of this, that's really difficult for the brain to do. So again, I think it is helpful to break everything down into little chunks, basically. Yeah, like you say, sometimes you've just got to hang in there and literally get to the end of a day physically and see how you go with the next one. And that's, as you say, giving yourself that space is important. There's a tendency in the brain to try and solve every single problem in the world at once, but you can't. Sometimes you can't solve any problems, but that doesn't mean that they're there forever. It's about patience.
Yeah, and it's about, you can only deal with one thing at a time. You can't be doing 100 things and trying to solve 100 things. You can only deal with what's in front of you in that moment. And it's like, if you slow it right down to that point of view, it really, for me, it really helped. Again, in hindsight, it really helped to slow things down like that. So for you, when you were in that kind of space, however many years ago, what was the thing that made you think, okay, I need to start doing something about this, about, the way I feel, about, you said the drinking too much, I'm aware of it, but what do I do to kind of get out of it now?
I was lucky to meet, well, I already knew, but I was lucky to have a really great new partner and friends who formed a kind of support system around me that I felt had been missing from my life, partly. No, I say partly because I always had a couple of really loyal friends even before this, but you can come to be reluctant to talk to them or to depend on other people. Allowing yourself to depend on other people is quite an important step, I think. A lot of what you hear about in life is geared towards self-reliance, and you can't trust anyone, you can only be your own best friend, all this stuff. And I think that's kind of quite damaging. I think there are lots of times in life when actually you ought to be able to turn to people, and you have to make yourself do that. So I think that was a kind of useful breakthrough for me, basically reminding myself that I could and should be part of networks of people. Again, it's kind of what the book is about. The book is about the fact that you don't really have to do anything in life alone, especially these days, because if you've got a phone or a laptop, or if you have any way of connecting to other people, then that option is there for you. And this is part of what the book is about. Like philosophically, I suppose a lot of people talk as if the fact that we've got like a phone, or that we're always on social media and stuff, is automatically a bad, because it means that we're all wrapped up in ourselves and we don't see each other as much physically, all this kind of stuff. And obviously that can be true, but there are loads and loads of pluses. The book is about people using nothing but like phones and internet to try and save a guy, basically. And I think there are loads of ways in which the technology we now have at our disposal should minimize human loneliness, basically. But they don't at the moment because we don't do it right. But I think we need to evolve. The next generation of humans needs to, and maybe will evolve better ways of living with the technology. Because if you're my sort of age, you have been overtaken by it a bit. But if you're a teenager now, then you grow up instinctively thinking in terms of TikTok, Twitter, phones, all of that. And again, that has some downsides, obviously. Middle-aged people will always grumble about it, but it has loads of potential upsides as well. We could have a much more healthily networked universe in 20 years' time than we do now, and the benefits to humans of that would be quite enormous, I think, in theory.
Yeah. What are some of the ways then that you think we could start using, social media or our phones in general as a better tool to be connected or feel that connection with it, especially now, right? Especially what we're going through now, that's becoming quite key. The amount of Zoom calls and FaceTimes and.
Well, I think that a lesson from this period is that, or at least, I mean, again, a lot of people are grumbling about the sheer amount of Zooming we've all had to do has been exhausting. There's no doubt about it. If I had to work like this all the time, then it would certainly have got me down by now. Like if I was doing 5 or 6 meetings a day on Zoom, as plenty of people are if they're in business, I can see why that is quite, boring and repetitive and all of it, and you don't have the benefits of human company. But that's the thing. I mean, if you're talking to people you like, I've had quite a few chats like this over Zoom with people. I've had like weekly catch-ups with friends and stuff like that, and played like games and all sorts of things. And basically, this still is company, I think. It's not the same as going to someone's house and having a drink, obviously, and all of us miss that. But it's also not the same as just sitting there on your own. So I think a possible lesson from this period is, virtual relationships have a value in their own right. It might not be the same thing as being able to give someone a hug, but it's also not nothing. And the different creative ways people have used, Zoom, video messaging, and all of it, I think prove that there is, for example, I've done quite a lot of shows online with this sort of setup, like Zoom calls, where the audience are in different little boxes and windows and stuff like that. And some of them work better than others, inevitably, but all of them do have the effect of bringing people together in some way. And I've started to notice that some people go to those shows who actually wouldn't go to a comedy show in real life because they can't get out or they don't want to. They don't like crowds, even the sort of crowds I get. They don't like semi. So and that has taught me, again, the internet. And again, I'd rather be in theatres. Obviously, I'd rather be doing what I recognise as my job. But also, I have to accept that loads of people, there's a whole community out there that, for whatever reason, can't do that stuff. And I wouldn't have thought of that before. So, again, online, it doesn't have to just be a poor man's way of seeing people. It can be a thing you create in its own right, I think. I did these 24-hour shows. I've done 2 of them now online. As a fundraiser, but also just for fun, to sort of perk people up. And both of them, but especially the last one, had far more people involved than you'd ever get when I used to do it in theatre and stuff like that. Yeah. Again, that's partly because people are stuck indoors and got nothing else to do. But the point remains, like, there's a world of connection out there which is easier to do with these devices. And in some ways, it's a miracle that we have them. If you'd seen this 50 years ago, you just wouldn't be able to understand it. You'd think it was the most miraculous. 20 years ago, really, when you would just about had MSN Messenger or whatever it was. Like, probably not even that. That's 15 years ago. Like, this would have been seen as like absolute life-changing magic for almost the whole history of the world. And we just don't, because after 3 weeks of it, you're like, oh, I've had enough of this now. But you shouldn't lose sight of the fact that it's an incredible gift to be able to connect to people anywhere in the world like this. When I was growing up, I would have thought this was the most wonderful future you could live in. Yeah,
like walking around with like a thing in your pocket where you can literally just see someone in Australia.
Exactly. It's mind blowing, and it's just that we get used to it so fast, and our brains very, very quickly evolve a sense of entitlement. If your phone doesn't work for a day, you're furious. You don't stop and think, it's incredible that I have a phone.
Yeah.
You can't really think like that. You'd be a weirdo if you spent all your time marveling at all the devices in your house. But it is worth now and again stepping back and thinking, Christ, if this pandemic had happened in the 90s, we just have to write letters to each other. I'm not saying that's necessarily worse, but it is a fairly lonely life.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned like there's creative ways that people have been kind of staying in contact and stuff. And one of the things that has been really, really helpful for me is my PlayStation. It's like pretty much every evening is like I'll get on the PlayStation and me and my mates are there playing along, and we've got our headsets on. It's like we're not seeing each other and hanging out, but we're still having the same jokes, and we're still having the chats and the camaraderie between us to make us still feel like. No, I feel like I've seen them, even though I probably haven't.
Exactly, and again, that's much better than if we didn't have network games and stuff like that. I mean, again, it's easy for people to say, the only socializing people in their 20s do now is on the PlayStation and stuff like that, or whatever. All the things people say about millennials and the generation after them. But again, I mean, even like I've got a kid who's 10, and he. At his mum's house, he's allowed to go on these like Fortnite and stuff in relatively small doses, because otherwise it will turn him into a serial killer probably. But even that's a social activity in a way which and again, that's quite hard for people to understand that are older, because we didn't grow up with you had mates around your house to play games maybe, but this idea of globally networked gaming is new again, so it's scary to some people because of that. And of course it has its downsides, because you can very easily corrupt young people like that. Everyone understands that, but again, it's pointless to overlook the many good sides of that, I think, which again, even if it's simple as like you said, having that community around you becomes a really important thing. And once again, you'd rather see them every night, but we can't have that life. And even when the pandemic is gone, and in this future that we're looking forward to, you still can't have that every night, because life isn't like that. So again, it's important to find different ways of connecting with people.